Okay, so my name is Sharon Jerry, and I work at program officer at the Nawi Collective. And for those joining us for the first time, Nawi is a Pan-African feminist collective working at the intersections of economic justice and the feminist political economy. So a lot of our work is concerned with how economies are organized, whose labor is recognized or erased, and what it would mean to build systems that sustain life. So on today's session, it marks the launch of the Development Journal on Pan-African Feminist Labour Narratives, a special edition we did on this. And the journal brings together a range of contributors reflecting on labor across different sites and experiences, which include, platform work, informal economies, care work, migration, extraction, queer labor, digital labor, and other forms of livelihood that often fall outside the dominant labor frameworks. So we feel what we feel is most important about this session is that it's not only presenting research, but also reflecting on what it means to produce feminist knowledge about labor within African context. So across the journal, contributors are asking how people survive, how they organize, how they resist, and imagine otherwise within systems that continue to produce precarity, exclusion, and violence. So this session invites us to think about storytelling, research, and analysis, not simply as academic exercises, but also as broader political work and movement building. And just building on that introduction of the session, we are joined by 4 contributors today who were authors, who formed part of the authors of the journal. And just to introduce them, I would like to, Joey, I'm not sure I know how to pin. If you could assist, Joey. I don't know if she's still here with us.
I've added the pin.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so we have 4 contributors with us today, and each of them will share their reflections from the articles they contributed to the journal. So our first speaker is Donia Mohamed, and her work explores the gig economy, gender, and visibility within Arab digital labor economies. The second one is Clarice Rufaro, whose article reflects on women's labor, extraction, and climate resilience economies in Zimbabwe. And the third one is Hayley. I cannot pronounce her second name, and I do not want to butcher it. So kindly help me with us once you come to your session, where her work centers queer neurodivergent labor and embodied resistance within Madagascar's informal economy. And finally, we will hear from Esther Nyawira, whose article examines digital sex work, platform exploitation, and young women's labor in Kenya. And with that introduction, I would like us to jump into the session. And I would like to invite Donia to get us started. Donia, please speak about your article, give us an overview of your research, what inspired it, and how media and development narratives shape how women's platform labor is understood, valued, or dismissed.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to thank the Nawi AfriFem Collective for organizing this important webinar series and for creating a space that centers feminist labor narratives from Africa and the Global South. And it's truly an honor for me to join this inspiring scholars, activists, researchers, feminist voices in this conversation on labor, visibility, survival, and justice in an age of crisis. My name is Dunya Tore. I am working mainly as an assistant professor of mass communication and broadcasting. I am from Egypt, mainly working as a researcher, tackling and studying topics on gender and media, digital communication, AI governance, and women empowerment. And currently, I'm serving as the manager of the Media Impact Lab MENA region, which is an innovative research center at my institution, which is the Canadian International College in Cairo. My research focuses particularly on how media narratives shape social realities, especially for women navigating digital spaces, informal economies, and new forms of labor. So today, mainly, I will speak about my article in which I contributed, and it was titled Gig Work, Gender and Visibility, Portrayals of Arab Women in Digital Labor Economies. The article was published in the journal Development, and it explores how Arab women engaged in digital gig work are represented across the different media systems, how they are represented across the different social media platforms and development narratives including them, and especially within Egypt and the broader global South context. What inspired me in this research specifically was something that I kept observing repeatedly in different media discourses, which is over the few last years, we have seen a huge celebration of digital labor and platform economies. We constantly hear different narratives about flexibility, entrepreneurship, empowerment, innovation, so we see women selling products online, working through freelance platforms, creating content on TikTok and Instagram, driving cars or ride-hailing applications, managing online businesses from home, and becoming influencers and digital entrepreneurs. But while these women are becoming increasingly visible on the digital spaces, I started asking myself an important question. Does visibility and appearance on digital platforms automatically means recognition and empowerment? Or are women simply becoming more visible while remaining economically insecure, digitally exploited, structurally invisible within the actual labor systems? So this question became the foundation of my research. My study specifically examined the contradictions or the conflict between visibility on one hand and recognition and real empowerment on the other hand. That's because in many cases, women are visible enough to be photographed, marketed, celebrated, and used within development campaigns, but not recognized enough to receive labor protections, to receive fair pay, social security, digital safety, and all of these points. So I believe this contradiction is not unique to Egypt. It's not only limited to Egypt context or even the Arab region, but I think that it resonates deeply across many African and global South contexts where women labor is essential and undervalued in the same time. Actually, the study was conducted between 2023 and 2024 in Egypt, and it depended mainly on qualitative methods. These qualitative methods combined together media monitoring on one hand and in-depth interviews on the other hand. I analyzed TV programs, news websites, NGO campaigns or non-governmental organization campaigns, TikTok content, Instagram accounts, YouTube channels, and different development narratives related to women in gig work. I also interviewed, I depended also on in-depth interviews in which I interviewed women working in digital labor sectors like freelancing sectors, online selling, content creation, food delivery, and all of these different categories. And regarding the findings, one of the most important findings of my research is that media portrayal of women gig workers are deeply shaped by what feminist scholars call visibility politics. What does this mean? Visibility politics? That women are allowed visibility, they are visible, they are shown, they appear, but under certain conditions. Like what? Like what? Under certain conditions. For example, mainstream media in Egypt portray women gig workers through highly emotional and moral narratives. For example, a woman delivery worker is not simply shown as a worker. She's shown as the struggling daughter, the sacrificing mother, the exceptional woman overcoming hardship. So her labor becomes emotionally inspirational rather than to be politically recognized, which is really needed on her side. In many TV reports, women are framed as extraordinary, doing something extraordinary just because they entered public workspaces traditionally associated or linked to be for men. So the media celebrates their resilience while avoiding deeper conversations about labor rights, platform exploitation, economic insecurities, unequal working conditions that women face in the digital labor. So in other words, the structural problem disappears and the individual woman becomes the story. So they are focusing on the story of individual females. This is very important because media systems often individualize survival. Instead of asking why are women forced into labor, why labor protections absent, why they are absent, why are digital platforms unregulated, why is paid care work, for example, is still carried by women, the discourse is shifting towards a more of she worked hard, she stayed strong, she became successful, so empowerment became reduced to individual endurance rather than the collective justice. And this is where feminist political economy becomes very important in understanding digital labor. Another major finding in the study concerns social media platforms themselves, specifically the social media platforms. So platforms like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook provide women with opportunities for self-representation. Many women are no longer waiting for traditional media to tell their story. They are not waiting to be hosted in TV or radio program to tell their story. They are creating their own narratives. This can be empowering, by the way, to create your own narrative. So women use digital visibility to gain income, to build communities, to challenge different stereotypes, to negotiate even public space in ways that was previously unavailable through the traditional media. But this visibility also comes with new forms of pressure. As it has its a positive side, it's also having the negative sides with the new forms of pressure. Women are now required to constantly perform visibility. They must remain appealing, emotionally engaging, algorithmically active, also available online, always available online. In many cases, women are expected to transform their personalities, transform her home, transform her emotions, motherhood, and even private life into marketable content. And this creates another hidden layer of labor, which is the emotional labor, or what we can call as algorithmic labor. And actually, one participant in my research described feeling exhausted from constantly smiling in videos while privately struggling financially and emotionally. Another participant spoke about receiving different comments, moral criticism, simply because she worked publicly in delivery services. So, those two examples show us that while digital platforms promise freedom and empowerment for women, they also expose certain kind of pressure, expose women to harassment, surveillance, moral policing, algorithmic control. And I think this is especially important when discussing feminist labor futures, because today labor is no longer only physical. Visibility itself has become labor, by the way. Attention has become labor. Personal identity has become also labor. So yet, labor often remains unrecognized within the formal labor frameworks. Another dimension that I explored was development and the NGO narratives around women economic participation. Many development campaigns aim to support women's economic empowerment, and some other do important work in amplifying women's voices. However, I found that many campaigns also unintentionally sanitize women's reality. They prefer stories that are inspirational, hopeful, and marketable. I can use for marketing this story. One NGO communication officer in my study, I remember he told me something very striking, which was, we are asked to show success stories, not struggles. Is this fair? Is this real empowerment? And I think that this sentence captured an important tension in developmental communication nowadays, because women are often represented as symbols of resilience, symbols of success stories, while the systems producing inequalities remain untouched, remain unspoken. Also, one of the most powerful aspects of this research was seeing how women actively negotiate, resist, and reshape the systems available. So many women strategically use digital platforms to create economic alternatives, to support their families, to challenge restrictive gender norms within their society. That's hindering their ability to go out into real market and to work in real labor. So they are challenging restrictive gender norms. They want to claim public spaces in societies where women visibility itself can be contested. Also, some women tried to use humor. Others depended on storytelling to gain more participation and to gain more engagement. Others based on solidarity networks online. Others intentionally reshaped how femininity and professionalism are presented digitally, and all of these points. So in our context, women are not only navigating the different types of capitalism, they are navigating capitalism alongside with other topics or with other points, like more respected politics, like economic instability, like shrinking social protections. So we can say that feminist labor analysis must remain intersectional, contextual, so it should be based on different contexts and grounded in lived realities. And as media scholar, as one searching about media and how development media can have a positive influence in our society, I strongly believe that representation matters because media does not simply reflect reality. Most of the theories of media say that media reflect reality, but I believe that media does not just reflect reality, but it constructs the social realities and social understanding. The stories we tell about women's work shape public attitudes. We can change people's attitudes towards women work, especially in the gig sector. Policy priorities. I can prioritize certain topics for policymakers, and even women's own understanding of themselves. And this is the most important point. So if women gig workers are represented only as inspirational individuals and success stories, then all of the stories will become invisible. It will become invisible. If women are represented only as victims, then their agency will disappear one day. But if we represent women as workers with rights, struggles, complexities, it's not only dreamy life, ambitions, political realities, then we begin moving forward toward more just labor futures. So ultimately, my article calls for a shift from symbolic visibility, just appearing, to structural recognition, from individual resilience to collective justice, and from market-friendly empowerment narratives towards feminist labor rights grounded in dignity, protection, and social justice. Because women do not only deserve to be seen, just seen is not enough. They deserve to be protected. They deserve to be empowered, recognized, valued, and heard. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dania.
You're welcome.
I really appreciated your reflections on visibility and recognition, and also how well you brought out the tensions between representation and exploitation within digital labor economies. We will move on to our second speaker. I'll now invite Clarice. Clarice, please share with us about your article, what inspired it, and what it would mean to build economies around care, regeneration, and ecological justice.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for the opportunity. And I'll be doing like a brief presentation on the paper that I co-authored with my colleague. I think she's here, Tracy Mafa. She's a friend and a colleague. So I am a development expert within my own right, and I work with communities in Zimbabwe implementing resilient livelihood projects. And most of these projects, I implement them in communities that have been heavily affected by mining, extraction, and in disaster communities that are affected by droughts, tropical cyclones. So those are the type of communities that I've been working in. And my colleague Tracy is a legal expert who works at the intersection of natural resource and mineral resource governance and human rights law. So this paper was heavily influenced by both our backgrounds and both of the work that we are doing within the communities that we are serving. And so for us, it was mainly on developing and documenting like the stories of women. And in these communities, and it went beyond just highlighting these women as victims, but we were also highlighting these women as critical actors within the development of communities, within the labor market, and within the restoration of natural resources. So in the article, we explored like the understanding of both paid and unpaid labor of women. And in terms of the unpaid labor, we're looking at the care work, how it is affected by the extractivist economies that are being served in the communities that we are working in, especially in Zimbabwe, living the context of Zimbabwe. In the article, we use 3 communities. We spoke of Wange, a community that is where coal extraction is happening in Zimbabwe, and it's the backbone of Zimbabwe's generation of electricity. But that community is slowly diminishing in terms of environmental standards and also in terms of well-being, because there are a lot of issues of environmental degradation, human displacement, and stuff that are happening within communities. Yet we are saying, of course, this community is a community that serves, that provides electricity for like 60% of electricity for the country, but it's being exploited of the coal. And now we are talking about the just energy transition discourse, but this community is struggling. How do we transition from use of coal when the communities that are already producing this coal are exploited? And how do we have that shift from clean data to clean energy while recognizing the rights and the well-being of the communities that have been serving us all these years in terms of generating electricity and energy for the nation of Zimbabwe? And we also talk about Marange, a community in Zimbabwe, where we have diamond, like it's a very rich community in diamond. And we talked about displacement and how it affected the well-being and livelihood of women and communities. Because after the exploitation of diamond, like a lot of families were displaced from a whole community and relocated in an environment that had nothing in terms of serving their daily livelihoods, nothing in terms of serving education systems, health facilities, and also like for the women who were already interacting with the environment, like using trees, herbs, and plants within the community, displaced from one community and then going to another community, which has nothing to do with the roots and the background of your livelihoods. And then we also spoke about Chimanimani, which was heavily affected by tropical cyclone Idai in 2019, and how the recovery system within those communities did not really recognize the role and the labor of women. So within this paper, we are questioning whether the development model that is being used in terms of development, in terms of creating jobs and everything, is recognizing the role of women, especially in mitigating climate change and in mitigating environmental and environmental management issues. So one of the key highlights of our papers is really exploring that the labor narrative as it is and the development model that is being used within these communities is exploiting both women and nature. So in as much as women are being exploited, nature and the environment is also being exploited. And in one way or the other, both the environment and women are affected, because women in everything that they are doing, they are working closely with the environment and already doing activities in terms of their gardening, their informal jobs, and everything that they are contributing to on the market. Like right now, what they are doing is closely linked to the environment, is closely linked to the protection of the environment. Everything that they do, the well-being of their families, the well-being of the livelihood systems like that women are leading in, it interacts with the environment. And yet these women are fighting against a system that is oppressive, a system that does not recognize their labor and their role, and a system that downplays the role that women are playing in terms of development and regenerating the ecosystem. So we raise critical issues around like uh sorry, I'm trying to get back to where so around how whether the current economic structures are affecting, like how are they affecting women and how are they affecting the environment. And the general outcome is that there's really is a lot of like practical need to have women at the forefront of development discourse and dialogues, because in as much as women are leading in the regeneration of the environment and well-being, and their care work is at the forefront of the community and supplementing even the labor that is being supplementing the labor that is recognized. Women are not at the forefront in terms of informing development opportunities, development policies, at the forefront in terms of navigating or informing how policy and strategy should strengthen the economic and development sector. So in as much as we're saying women have a lot to contribute to the economy and the environment, they are not recognized. Like their roles are downplayed in so many ways. So the major question was like, what then does it mean to build economies around care, around regeneration and ecological justice? And the importance is that you cannot divorce issues to do with environmental well-being, climate justice, and women's care labor and informal labor without and just sit in a room and without talking about women, without talking about the labor of women. So it's very important that the conversation around labor and development within policy frameworks and strategy development should be led and should include women's voices, because at the end of the day, whoever is leading the discourse and the conversation around development and environment is not really like creating the intersection, like recognizing the intersection of these critical issues. And then we also talk about the need to recognize unpaid domestic labor as the foundation for the economic activities that are happening within the country. We can say like, of course, women have their unpaid, they have their informal roles which they are already underpaid for or which are not already recognized. But then the challenge with that is that it's only like when we simply say that women should be recognized for their what can I say, for the informal labor, it then overshadows their background role around care and domestic work in terms of cleaning, in terms of taking care of human waste and everything. There are a lot of things that women are involved in terms of development. So the general assessment of all the paper and everything that was saying was we cannot talk about GDP in terms of development matrices without including women's role, especially indigenous women, and especially their intersection and work within the environment. And another critical issue is that in as much as we say that we are talking about development and environment and everything, we have to acknowledge that the current development model that is being implemented in countries like ours, Zimbabwe right now, is an adoption of the colonial development model, which was already constantly suppressing. So we can't talk about the liberation and independence of states and nations without recognizing that without transforming the labor and development narrative. Independence is more than just saying we won a war. Independence is also about including the rights, the responsibilities, the well-being and livelihoods of women and all the marginalized communities. And that also includes the environment. So that's the long and short of what I have to say and explore about our presentation. Thank you so much. Yeah. Sorry, at one point I'm having issues with my throat.
Thank you so much, Clarice. Your article has really helped us think about labor, ecology, and extraction all together, and what becomes possible when economies are organized around care and regeneration rather than profit. We will move on to the third speaker of the day. I'll now invite Hayley. Hayley, please share with us about your article, what inspired it, and what labor movements can learn from some of the interventions and practices you wrote about.
So, good afternoon again, everyone. My name is Hailey Angia van Mezen. That's how we pronounce it. It's a bit of a long name. It's some sort of symbol in Madagascar to have a long name. So, if you meet any of my fellows, you will notice that they will have a very long name. So, first, about myself. I am a queer Marxist feminist organizer based in Madagascar. Apart from that, I am part of multiple leftist local organizations here that are doing militant works. For example, during the September 2025 Gen Z uprising that happened here in Madagascar, I was part of those who did the protest and organized logistically and everything. I'm also working for a feminist organization here in Madagascar, working toward reproductive justice. And I am a PhD candidate in political science at the University of Antananarivo. So that's about myself. My paper, I work with this with one of my colleagues, another Marxist, but he can't join us today, so I will be presenting our research. In the beginning, we decided to title it Bodies in Defiance, an analysis of queer neurodivergent labor under the neoliberal extractivism, but we were reworking that title and actually the content of the article with the new political settings that we have now. So this article is a work in progress, so it won't be in the journal yet, but we hope that it will be published anyway in another edition or a special edition. So first, I would like to define some of the main words I will be using during this presentation. I will be using mostly queer and neurodivergent, and I combine them to say neuroqueer. So queer is individuals from the LGBTQIA+ community that defies gender norms. So that's the most important part in terms of looks, attitudes, and everything they do in their daily life. They try to go beyond gender norms and cis heteronormative norms. Neurodivergent is individuals with another settings of I don't like to say brains, but we can include autistic people, ADHD, dyslexia, and the dyspraxia as part of the neurodivergent people. And what is interesting is that here in Madagascar and around us, most of the queer people are actually also neurodivergent, as neurodivergent people have another understanding of social norms and social behaviors. So it's really easy for them to defy all of those norms that we normally follow in terms of looks and how we are. So that's for the definition. What inspired that research is that first, it's from personal experience. I am queer and neurodivergent working here in Madagascar, and most of the people around me are in the same situation. And we noticed that in terms of work and how we live in our capitalistic society, we have a lot of struggles, issues, and new forms of resistance. So for a bit of a context, the system of labor in Madagascar can be divided in two main components. There is the formal economy. So we have a low rate of industrializations here in Madagascar, and what are the mainly form of work that people can find in the formal economies are call centers and everything that is related to web, call, and working under the delocalization of labor. So most of the people here that are in formal economy are working for foreign enterprise and doing work from Madagascar, but the profits goes in the imperial core. So that's it for that. That is caused, there is actually the case because in Madagascar, labor is really cheap because we have a high rate of unemployment. So workers tend to accept cheap deals and really bad deals to survive. And those don't usually have like unions or anything that can protect them and their rights. So that's for the formal economy, which is like 15% of Malagasy population. So that's really like, let's say, a minority here that are working in the formal economy. And then we have informal economy where the majority of the population are working in. Those have no social security, no protection whatsoever, and definitely no union to defend their interest. The workers in informal economy are also at the front of state and police violence here. They are being displaced and harassed, and not even just the state, but other fellow citizens harass them online as they are portrayed as people that doesn't follow the laws and that are disturbing the orders of the main city. And mostly neurodivergent and queer people are part of that informal economy. Another main component of Madagascar's labor system is that we have a lot of colonial legacies and monarchist legacies. So during the before colonization, we were in a monarchy, and people that aren't from the upper class were doing free work. Like they were literally obligated to work for free for the ruling class. And when colonization arrived, they didn't have to create a new form of system of labor because those were already there. It was a form of enslavement. And then they just took it and continued with the violence of the French colonizers that were in Madagascar. In the article, we have a really long paragraphs explaining the types of enslavements that were in Madagascar and the types of works, the free works that people from low classes and especially those who doesn't follow gender norms were doing for free and under an extreme violence. Here also, productivity, profits, and the worker being considered as disposable is like the norm here. So if you're not really productive, and especially if you try to defy whatsoever like how to dress at work, how to dress when you go to some places representing your work, or if you don't respect the 9 to 5 working hours, usually the employers here directly say you can be replaced by tomorrow, and which is actually a fact since the high rate of employment is here and a lot of educated people doesn't have a job and they can get replaced very easily. So another part is that neurodivergency in Madagascar is still considered like a disease or a burden. So only the new high-end enterprise that doesn't even cover like 0.5% of the employment demands exists and try to accommodate neurodivergent people, but they do it in such a way that it's like a laboratory and productivity and profits are still at the core front. So having all of that in mind, we decided to like document all of that. How are the neuroqueer people living in that system of labor that definitely doesn't align with who they are and their interest? For this research, we began field investigation last year during Pride Month. One of the main, let's say, interesting thing about this paper and this research is that we decided to have another way to do investigation we didn't do like interviews and in let's say Western way of doing things. We did story circles, and we did it during queer gatherings that we organized with my comrades during Pride Month. So we explained to everybody that was there that we are working on this paper, and we would like for us all to co-create this paper and see what can we say about the working conditions of neurodivergent queer, what is being done, and what does exist. So we held 2 queer gatherings last year, and that's how we drafted the first findings. But afterwards, after the Gen Z uprising that happened, we noticed that another factor came, which is the political crisis, and that changed a lot of things in how queer people view themselves and try to resist and try to survive, since it's beginning to no, we are under a regime that is military, conservative. The people in power wants literally to like fusion the state and the church. So now queer people are facing even more terrifying situation that can push them to abandon any form of resistance. And I think it will be really interesting to document that in the paper and see what's the big difference in terms of working conditions and how they try to defy those gender norms here. So, neuroqueer people are in the majority in informal economy, as I said, and that led to an exclusion from unions and general labor movements here in Madagascar. We have a few labor movements here that are quite strong and trying to fight for example, the augmentation of the minimum wage, but then they don't take into account those who are not like them, let's say like them, and with the same interests. So that's one of the big issue that we found during those investigations. Also, another thing is that uh, NGOs and some enterprise are pretending to care about neurodivergent and queer people through inclusion. And let's say that I'm picking up a little bit of what my colleague said earlier during her presentation, but usually they follow a form of Western and paternalistic paradigm. So they want to sell stories of what queer people is and how fancy it is, and also to put them in some form of minority representation. So usually it's only the queer people that are already not defying gender norms anymore, and so they can like go up in the ladder of corporate ladder. Those are being tokenized, but no changes are happening in terms of voices, accesses to resources, and even the sharing of profits from their labor. So queer people are being tolerated and put in the forefront as a minority, and they call it inclusion. In the paper, we talk about the concept of violence of inclusion that the queer neurodivergent people are facing because they are being utilized by some NGOs that aren't even led by queer people or aren't even fighting for their rights and their rights to work. So now let's talk about the queer resistance. How does queer people survive in this system of labor that definitely aren't for them? So the first thing we noticed during the story circles is that most of them quit their jobs. So they tried for a few weeks or a few months to be in the formal economy, mostly call centers, and it's not for them, and they aren't even trying very hard to like resist, but just by their existence and how they defy gender norms and some sort of liberal productivity concept, they whether quit or they get literally pushed out of the companies. What they do is also creating their own social enterprise. So here in Madagascar, we have a few programs that are trying to push for entrepreneurship here. So queer people are also trying to create their own, but with a bit of a sparkle in it, which means that they try to undo any form of rigid productivity settings and rigid hierarchy. So like they're doing some sort of anarchy enterprise. And some of them are working for NGOs under directions of other queer people that try to implement a new form of how working settings that are mostly based sometimes in indigenous knowledge, because here in Madagascar, before colonization, queer people had a social role and working roles, and so the new generation is trying to take some of the knowledge that was there before and try to take some teachings on how to work together and especially not get burned out and survive under this capitalistic society. Another form of resistance is gathering together into a house that shares most of the expenses between each other. So like housing, food, electricity, they're sharing that between 5 to 10 peoples. It's a lot of people because mostly here in Madagascar, it's a way of surviving for those neurodivergent queer that get actually kicked out of their families because of who they are and how they defy those gender norms and that idea of you must be productive to exist and to actually get any some sort of protection or benefits here. Another form of resisting, and this is new, this is actually not really discussed in the original paper because it happened after the political crisis, is organizing queer party with clear goal of defying gender norms. Like right now, they have parties that try to give some rules. First, you come with like fluid clothing, with hair going everywhere, looking like a fairy. No, you're a woman, you're a man, everything like that. And that's a new way for them to resist actually, and with political discussion going around and how to organize between each other. The last part of queer resistance is mutual aid. So this is not exclusively between neurodivergent queer people because there is a broader audience to that. So they are in mutual aid with neighbors, but especially peasants and people from the informal economy. What I have saw is that the big companies, everybody that is informal economy to do it, but those that are already surviving, that try to do cooperatives and try to help each others in terms of food, clothing, schooling, to mitigate everything they're facing. So all of that raised the question, also all of those resistance methodology raise the question of care and emotional work recognition, since all of that, since it's becoming a new form of oppression. Neuroqueer people here are facing various forms of physical, state violence, moral violence, harassment, everything, and those who take care of those burnt out neurodivergent workers are themselves. So it raises the question of reproduction, social reproduction, and also how they actually they're being definitely erased from that part of the society. They hold society together and even enlarge those forms of care to other people, not explicitly only for neuroqueer people. And that's the question I think we should discuss a little later. So for the perspectives, the real work that has to be done here in Madagascar is how to organize those neuroqueer workers who defend their interests and also to connect them to a broader Pan-Africanist labor movements that follows what we developed in the paper is neuroqueer praxis, so a radical form of demand and labor movements, because if here they are being excluded from what is already existing, they have to be on the front of creating their own, and that's for the paper. So now what I would like to also raise the question is, here in Madagascar, neuroqueer people are facing a lot of oppression and exclusion. But let's say that we are kind of, as we are an island, we are kind of isolated from any other Pan-Africanist labor movements. So I think that raises the question of how to connect and organize all those people and link them to those who already are working towards their interest. So that I think that's it. And the last thing is that this research is kind of a hybrid between a political manifest and a research paper. So this is why it is taking a lot of time. Me and my fellow colleagues that are working on it did this because we have years of activist work, and we saw how it is impossible to stay neutral in terms of what is happening right now. So I'm really glad actually that our research was considered and actually highlighted during this launch, because it actually gives hope. So I think I'm gonna end there. Thank you so much everyone for listening, and I'm here if you have any questions, any resources, or even how to connect to a broader Pan-Africanist feminist movement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hailey, even for attempting to teach me how to pronounce your second name. I still cannot, but I hope I will one day. And thank you so much I really appreciated the way you challenged, dominant ideas of productivity, inclusion, and labor itself, while also grounding resistance in embodiment, mutual aid, and care. We will now move on to our fourth speaker. I'll invite Esther. Esther, please share with us about your article, what inspired it, and what it would mean to discuss digital sex work through the lens of labor rights, safety, dignity, and agency.
Thank you so much, Sharon, and thanks to every speaker who has taken the mic before me. I really appreciate and say a huge congratulations to everyone. I know that this is a labor of love and patience and a lot of back and forth. And so well done to you, Sharon, also, and Janita and the team that was helping us to put our thoughts together. We appreciate. My name is Esther Nyawera. I work with Femnet. I am Kenyan. I am a young woman. And I am just happy to be alive and grateful for this opportunity. The paper that has brought us here is a paper that we did together with my friend Anne Agar. And I will start with what inspired us. I think we saw the call to write, and we kept telling ourselves, we need to write, we need to be writing, but we didn't know what we wanted to write about or what we should write about. And so we took our time, and we at some point Anne came with the idea and said, there's this thing that's happening where girls go online, they do online or digital sex work. And at that point I didn't have an idea of what it was. But she knew some friends, girls, because what was common between us is that we were working both in girls' rights movements. She works for Polycom, and so because of as a result of our work and our interactions with the girls, then yes, we knew that, she informed me that there were girls who have a story to tell, and they were willing to share that story with us. And so that's how the journey started. documenting their lives, listening, and just being present, because that is what also solidarity and sisterhood looks like. So our paper is called Power, Profit and Precarity, and we examine how account holders and coupon systems exploit young sex workers in Kenya. And so it examines the lived realities or experiences of 3 young Kenyan girls who are between the ages of 20 and 24, whom we decided to call Lulu, Shani, and Nyota, but those are pseudonyms. And they are involved in digital sex work. But we also wanted to listen to their stories from an Pan-African feminist perspective, but also from a trauma-informed perspective or approach in our interactions with them, because we knew that the work that we were doing, we could either, cause more harm, and that is not what we wanted to do. So we were very clear and very patient in our interactions with them. So this paper or this research, it's just an illustrative research of what the bigger system looks like. It explores 2 mechanisms of exploitation, and this has come up from across the presentations, the 3 speakers who have spoken before me. There are similarities, there's keywords that you keep hearing: exploitation. So this one, our research showed us that account control, there is account control by third parties. And so we were asking ourselves, who owns the accounts? Who owns the passwords? Who owns the payment systems? And I will talk a little bit about that, on how that happens. And there is also, once you have an account, you have a platform where you make money or you create content, how are you rewarded or how are you paid? So there is opaque coupon or token payment systems where earnings are filtered through, or the girls would call that person a boss, who sets the exchange rates and even the deductions, and they're the ones who determine how much you will earn at the end of the day. So this research it's also important because as the world evolves and we keep talking about digitalization, sometimes people talk about human-centered digitalization. In this world of the 4th industrial revolution, it tends to be framed as a neutral force of progress and economic opportunities. But it demands scrutiny from a feminist perspective, because if we don't do that, and we know that there are many, we are not the same, we are different, and our needs and priorities are also different. If we don't look at things from that angle, then it means that there are people who will remain invisible, who will not be seen, who will not be heard. And we also talk about, it was very important for us to also do this because we are now living in an age where there is technology-facilitated gender-based violence and abuse, which is on the rise. But maybe most of the times when we talk about it, we talk about the bullying that happens online. We also talk about porn, revenge porn, and all those kind of things. But there are people who face that violence. They face it when they're on their line of work. So that was also important, and also because we needed to be the ones who are telling our stories, who are documenting and sharing, so that others can also maybe have the courage to share it, and also be inspired to tell it. We don't want an outsider to come and tell our stories, which has been the trend most of the times. So this research is a labor of, it's a labor story. It's about who profits and who is protected and who is rendered invisible. The 3 girls that we spoke to, Lulu, Shani, and Nyota, none of them felt that they had full information or real freedom to choose. Their stories, they reflect a common pattern where women are recruited through personal networks into a tightly controlled digital economy, and they do this without contracts, they do this without labor rights, and they do this without informed consent. The systems that are there to help people to make money, they are systems they mask as economic opportunities, but they are systems of coercion. And this coercion is masked as flexibility, and exploitation is also masked as empowerment. I talked about account control and opaque systems. And so what happens is that the girls or the boss, like in this case, the girls were told, oh, come, I will show you a job. A friend of ours, has a house. So they have the boss, quote unquote, has rented a big house, maybe 5 bedrooms. And then they have about maybe 10 girls living in that building. They don't leave. You work for so many hours. You have to be awake. And in addition to the work that you do that pays you, you also have to do, they also told us they do, what is the word I'm forgetting? The unpaid care work. They will do division of labor in terms of the chores, house chores, cooking, cleaning, and all that. And that is not paid for. And again, they also have to give their personal identifications like ID and passports to this boss, so that just means that they cannot leave that place. And so the boss is the one who will open the account or register on the platforms that they use for their work. They will retain the emails, they will retain the passwords, and they will retain the payment information. And all the money first goes to the boss. If the girls mess up, the account can be locked and that means that there is immediate loss of income, clientele, and digital visibility, which will be used as a punishment. And this was very critical because it means that when your account is locked, your clients will move to another person, and you see, then by the time you come back, you will have to start from zero. Then in terms of opaque payment systems, the intermediaries that are there, the boss earns, they take 50 to 70% of the total earnings workers, with only 30 to 50%. So for instance, one of the girls told us that if they are paid, if they get money, if they are the coupons or the tokens that they get, if they are an equivalent of $50, they will be given $15. And then the supervisor or the person who owns this business will say the rest will cover expenses, or they will not just explain anything. Remember, these girls are between the ages of 20 and 24. Then we also came across digital facilitated gender-based violence. And this comes in place when the women's content is live streamed or it is pre-recorded, and it can be captured, it can be archived, and it can also be redistributed without their knowledge or their consent. And this means that the girls can receive threats because this is something that is really personal. And it will often target, what evil people want to ensure that when they get access to this information, the first people they want to share it with their family, the families of these girls, or their communities, their friends. And so that means that they lose the sense of community. They also lose a sense of safety. And when all this is happening, it's happening in the Kenyan's context where there is criminalization of sex work. And there is also, yes, there's violence, but it's a double bind because now it means that when women face extortion and abuse online, they risk arrest if they report these cases. But the girls, they were not just, they know that this is happening, but they have a voice, even if the system is trying to weaken them and to silence them and to make them invisible. They still know and want to be seen for who they are. They know that they don't want to be passive victims. They are very articulate on what they want and the vision that they have for their work. They say, for instance, that we are not just content creators, we are not tokens, we are human beings. And they want transparency. They don't want to be saved. They want transparency in payments. They want to have control over the pricing of their work. They want their clients to also be accountable, because some of them would be not accountable. The system protects the clients because it's the clients who bring in the money. So they want the clients to also be accountable. They also want the platforms to conduct audits or to be audited and see whether they really stand for the principles of human rights that they claim to stand for. And they also want to have the right to not be surveilled or to be exploited. So they find purpose or strength in solidarity. They have networks which help them to share about, for instance, abusive clients. They share tips for safety. And sometimes they also collaborate to build more protective environments. So they will tell each other, maybe this supervisor is better than this other person. And so they were saying that when you are alone, you are easy to exploit, but when we are together, we are more stronger. So what it means if we were to look at this work from a labor of, or if we were to discuss digital sex works through a labor framework in terms of labor rights, safety, dignity, and agency, it means that, number one, we have to shift, or the society needs to shift the focus from looking at sex works as, immoral or just from a moral point of view. It means that we should shift, from judging young women, or regardless of whether they are young or old, and the fact that they are doing sex work, to interrogating the systems that exploit them. And I think this is both important, whether it is a physical setting or an online setting, because it happens across the board. It also reveals structural parallels when we look at digital sex work from a labor framework, because it helps us to look at where we are right now. Are there patterns of, for instance, what happened in the past during colonial times? And yes, it is. There is a parallel. Account control mirrors colonial labor gatekeeping. When we talk about token and coupon systems, this also mirrors the plantation script, where economies, where people would work in plantations and then they would be paid in coupons or in non currency forms, and this, whatever they have been paid, they can only use it within that plantation because they used to live nearer where the places where they were working. And then in terms of algorithmic demonetization, this also mirrors racialized policing of Black women's bodies and labor. And number three, if we also look at it from a labor rights, safety, dignity, and agency lens, it means that we are centering the women's own analysis. Yes, I said they are not asking to be saved. They are naming specific, concrete demands about payment transparency, account ownership, client accountability, and freedom from violence. This also means that our approach in terms of discussing decent the digital sex work, it means that we expand the meaning of what decent work looks like. The ILO's decent work agenda, it must go beyond what is informal. It must go what is formal. That's what I wanted to say. To what is informal or the informal economies, those that are digital and those that are criminalized in terms of the labor. Or it will, if we don't do that, then it will remain to be a framework that is only protecting those who are already protected, or those who are supposed, quote unquote, to be, or those who are seen as the only ones who are supposed to be protected. Yeah, so I will leave it at that. I think if you want to read it, it's a good story. It's a good article that will help us to be able to have respect, and to look at young women from a different perspective. Thank you so much, Sharon. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Esther. Your article has pushed us to think beyond moral framings of digital sex work and instead engage seriously with questions of labor, exploitation, safety, and worker agency. I would like to thank all the contributors for such rich and thoughtful interventions. One thing that has really stood out across all the presentation is how labor continues to exceed narrow understandings of work. Across these interventions, labor appears as survival, care, adaptation, refusal, creativity, organizing, and resistance. Another thread that feels important is the question of visibility, whose labor becomes recognized and valued, whose labor remains hidden or criminalized, and how systems of power shape these distinctions. I'm also hearing a strong challenge to dominant economic frameworks that continue to separate labor from ecology, embodiment, care, sexuality, disability, and everyday survival. The journal pushes us to think about labor in much more expensive and political ways. And at this point, I would want to open up the conversation to everyone who has joined us today. So please feel free to put your questions and reflections in the chat or raise your hand if you would like to come in directly. Fiona, I think your hand.
You see Fiona? Okay. Yeah.
Oh, you can take it from here, yeah.
Fiona, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I would like to commend the lady who has just presented to us. The issues that she presented are real issues that are relating to digital sex workers who are also part of the digital economy or the platform economy. And I'm one of the committee members of the workers group under ITUC Africa that are negotiating the convention and recommendation to protect workers on the gig economy or platform economy. And a statement also brings about issues of gender inequalities that are involving the digital sex workers, especially cyber violence, and also the issue of the algorithm management system, which is very discriminatory and not transparent in handling issues for the digital platform workers. These are the real issues that we are dealing with as we negotiate this instrument. And if you don't mind, I would like to ask the lady that has been presenting to actually send me her presentation so that I can use that particular issue as a practical example of what is happening so that we can incorporate protections and rights into the convention. I think if you talk to Sharon or Joanita, they can give you my email. My name is Fiona Gandiwa Magaya, and I'm a member of the ITUC Africa from Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona, for grounding that and for making that connection between what the challenges of digital sex workers and what you're doing on the ground and how we move beyond this. How are we reimagining this, and what systems are we putting in place to ensure that we are sustaining life, and then that we are also according dignity to work that traditionally is classified outside of moral framing. I don't know if I see another hand. And yes, for sure, we will connect Esther with you, Fiona. We will. I don't know if there's another hand I'm missing, Joey. Or maybe questions I have missed in the chat. Are there? Okay. Okay. So I think now we are coming to the tail end of today's session. And as we come towards the end, I don't know if I'm locking anyone out. I just confirming. Okay. 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 So as we begin to close, I would like to invite all the contributors to reflect on our shared closing question, which is what does it mean to produce Pan-African feminist knowledge about labor from the experiences of workers whose lives and work are often excluded from dominant labor frameworks? So I think we can go in maybe how we began. We can start with Donia, then Clarice, then Haley, then Esther, if that works.
And I think they can also give their closing reflections as well.
Absolutely. Donia, you're still muted? Or there is a hand?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Sorry. Okay, so mainly, first of all, thank you for all the wonderful contributions. I really enjoyed listening to other scholars and researchers, and I really enjoyed reading the comments and the intersections on the chat box. And regarding your point, I think producing Pan-African feminist knowledge about labor means first recognizing that many workers who sustain our economies have historically been treated as invisible within dominant labor frameworks. So traditional labor discussions often focus only on formal employment, productivity, wages, and institutional workspaces. But feminist perspectives remind us that labor is much broader than this. Care work is labor, as my colleague said. Emotional labor is labor. Digital visibility is labor. Survival itself, as we said, can become labor in context shaped by economic crisis and inequality. So, producing the Pan African feminist knowledge means shifting the center of knowledge production away from institutions alone and towards the life experience and the reality of workers themselves, especially women, informal workers, queer communities, migrants, content creators, domestic workers, and digital gig workers, whose realities are often excluded from the policy conversation. It also means challenging whose voices are considered legitimate knowledge. A feminist Pan-African approach asks us to treat lived experiences as theory, as something that we can study, as political knowledge, as expertise. And in my opinion, I think this is especially important in digital economies because many new forms of labor remain invisible even while they are heavily visible online. Um, so, feminist labor knowledge requires us to move beyond celebration narratives and ask deeper questions. Who benefits from visibility? Who controls platforms? Who remains economically insecure? Who carries unpaid care across all the different platforms? And whose labor continues to sustain economies without recognition? I also think producing this knowledge collectively is important because knowledge production itself is political in a way or another. And when African and Global South feminist scholars center the experience of excluded workers, we are not simply adding new stories to existing frameworks, but we are challenging the frameworks themselves. So ultimately, I believe that Pan African feminist labor knowledge is about dignity. It's about ensuring that workers are not only economically visible, but socially recognized, politically heard, as we said, structurally protected. And I think conversations like this one are part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dania. Clarice, you want to come in?
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sharon. So for me, what it means to creating creating feminist labor knowledge is number one, acknowledging that labor laws and standards are greatly determined by colonial legacies that overlook both women's productive and reproductive roles. And we need to collectively shift that model through collective advocacy. And this has been a mindset that I've had for a long time. But then from all the presentation that we had so far about the various labor aspects that we're talking about, there's a colonial legacy that is shaping the labor narratives around sex work, the labor narratives around digital platforms and everything. So there is this model, extractivism and everything is not an African model of labor. And if we look back at the history of where we are coming from, labor was distributed like before the colonial era, the labor of women was recognized, appreciated, and respected. And we need to go back to our roots and ensure that the knowledge that we are producing ensures that we hold whoever, like the colonial legacy, accountable for disrupting the labor narrative that represents the African reality of labor and how women are represented on the labor market. And then also another thing is feminist knowledge should be modeled in such a way that it's not in isolation. Like when we talk about labor, there are various phases of labor, like I mentioned. We talk about the gig economy that we're talking about. We have the green economy, we have women's paid and unpaid labor, reproductive and productive labor. All those roles intersect in one particular like space and narrative in which we cannot talk about one without speaking of the other. So when it comes to shaping policy and shaping strategies around the labor narratives and development conversation and strategies across the globe and within the communities that we serve, we need to ensure that there is intersection, there is connectivity, and there's a voice that represents all the facets of labor and roles and rights of women within the various research aspects that we're doing. And then finally, it's very important that everything, like as an environmentalist, as someone who's been working in intersection with the environment, there's limited, like I hope you can hear me because my laptop is saying low bandwidth. Can you hear me?
Breaking a bit. Can you hear us?
Okay, so let me just yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
So I'll switch off the camera so that it's easier. So one final thing, as someone who's been at the intersection of the environment, the economy, and
Clarice,
labor
could you please
and the
repeat?
rights
We
of
lost you a
women.
bit.
All the things that we're talking about, digital labor and everything, it all goes back to the environment. And we really need to ensure that there's enough research we put out there in terms of ensuring that we develop. Hello? Oh, okay. So,
We didn't hear you at the end.
okay, it seems my network was going unstable. I was just saying that we need to create create we need to create a platform, like continuous platform for putting out. We're talking about our intersecting, like I said. So we need a platform to train more feminist researchers who are really committed to ensuring that research is grounded in feminist principles. Research is grounded in acknowledging the rights and the rights of the communities that we serve through our research work. It brings the clear picture of what is going on, and brings recommendations that are grounded in feminist.
Sharon, I think Clarice is done, but Clarice, if you could also just type what you had shared, because we kept losing you a bit, but thank you.
Okay, we can move on to Haley. Ghislaine, I can see your hand.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Wait.
Okay.
Yep.
So to answer that last question on what does it mean to produce Pan-African.
Yes. Can I?
Ghislaine, maybe let's let Haley go and then we will take your question at the very end. Is there anyone speaking?
Can you guys hear me now?
Oh, yes, now we can.
Okay, so as I said, to answer that last question on what does it mean to produce a Pan-African feminist knowledge about labor from the experiences of workers whose lives and work are often excluded from dominant labor, I think that question is really interesting, and I would like to share a little bit, just one sentence on my PhD work right now. I'm currently working on knowledge production and how it is actually a way to do class struggle, and it's a form of political power. And we are right now participating in it, and for the interest of that working class that we enumerated, especially those that are bearing most of the work, and they deserve to be heard and highlighted. So producing this knowledge is also for me a tool to organize the workers and also to document and debates for all of those future generation of Pan-African feminists that will come after us, because we may do a lot of works on the ground and everything that is happening around us are being lived right away, but those also needs to go in the future, so they don't come from like they don't work empty-handed, and they can see what has been done and what is being talked about by us right now. And lastly, I would say that having this framework of Pan-Africanist, decolonial, feminist framework makes our journal politically grounded, and I think that that's very amazing. And I would like to thank all of you and the team for this incredible work. And I think that's how I'm gonna end this short presentation of mine, to say thank you very much. And also, I'm really glad that there are a lot of people that are attending this, and I won't hesitate to share the recorded version that will be on YouTube. So that's it for me. So thank you for fighting for the workers and doing this for this labor month. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hayley. We can move on to Esther.
Thank you, Sharon. For me, one thing crossed my mind out that I am reflecting on as we think about what producing Pan-African feminist knowledge about labor means. And one of my reflections is the fact that dominant labor frameworks like the ILO's decent work agenda, the trade unions movements, and the formal employment law, they are largely built around a particular image of a worker or who a worker should be. Maybe it should be a male who is formally employed in a recognized sector with a contract. But the reality of our lives is that the majority of women, or even young women, are working in informal sectors, and that means that they live outside this image. We young women, for instance, were doing sex work, especially in digital platforms. They are operating in criminalized contexts that are not. So that means that they are not just at the margins of these frameworks, but they are actually outside. They are excluded from these frameworks. And so producing a Pan-African feminist knowledge means that their experiences is are the first ones to challenge what this labor theory looks like and who it is built for, or who it was formulated for. Secondly, Pan-African feminist knowledge appreciates that even if we, for instance, in our case, we had 3 case studies, we used a trauma-informed and an African feminist approach. It's a pushback to refuse the pressure to say that even if the sample is too small, and we can't use it to generalize, but still we refuse to say that the stories from the 3 girls are not, they are nothing, that they mean nothing because the data is so small or because the statistics are so small. No, their stories and their realities, their experiences, they deserve to be listened to, they deserve to be documented, and they deserve to be used for advocacy, to raise our voices and to resist oppression and exploitation, even if they are 3 from a single country. We know that that is not just the reality. With resources, we can be able to document more of these stories. Number 4, most of the times, and I had mentioned this earlier, we are trying right now to be the ones who are documenting and telling our stories. But I think also the how we do that means a lot, or it will go a long way, because we are the only ones who can be able to tell our stories. We are the ones who, our foremothers, on whose shoulders we stand on, they went through the colonial times, and so the lives that we are living right now, we are living the fruits of that colonial experiences. And so it means that as we document our knowledge, we cannot document that knowledge without looking back on where we come from and why the systems are here, because we have inherited a system that is toxic, a system that is exploitative. And so somebody else, an outsider, may come and only look at the reality and not ask, how did you get here? But we are able to say, we are here because our local, because our past, is the one that has shaped how the present looks like. And so it means that our Pan-African feminist knowledge will not just be an add-on as an example to a universal story. No, it insists that the theory itself must be rebuilt from the Southern post-colonial experiences that we have. Lastly, it means our work has shown that what we wrote showed that the young women are hyper visible as content, but they are very invisible as workers. And so a Pan-African feminist knowledge production must create a different kind of visibility, one that is political rather than exploitative. That means that publishing in journals like The Development, it means naming the system rather than the women. It means that centering their demands and analysis rather than their suffering, and their knowledge is in service of their agency. It's not just for academic or career advancement. It's also for policy audiences so that they can be able to improve the work that they are doing. And I'm happy that even in this conversation, we are able to see such light that are going to help us to move the work that we have begun forward. Yeah, thank you so much, Sharon. I'll stop at that.
Thank you so much, Esther, for that. I think the issue of visibility, the issue of reclaiming our histories, and for the importance of theorizing for ourselves and ensuring that our stories are heard is coming out very strongly. I would like to, I see Ghislaine's hand is still up, so I would like to call upon Ghislaine to make a contribution. Micah had seen your hand up. I don't know if she's still on the call, and maybe not. Or maybe she is, but her hand is no longer up.
Hello. Can I?
Yes.
Okay, thank you to give him the floor. I just want to jump on the answer of the question that you raised and ask her to respond. I would like to invite all of the experts around of this webinar to join us to be able to build these Pan-Africanist approaches. So please, I'm looking for researchers. I'm looking for facilitator on some of the thematic. And that is why I post the conference that I already talked about and give you the period. Please let us get in touch. We contact Joanita. Then we can find together a regional level solution to the two big answers that you raised. Please, we have a platform for research and everybody is needed to build this answer together in Africa. So this is a space that we can sit together for 3 days to build this kind of response, to look at labor, union, women approach to access to decent work, social justice, and also inequality. Please join us. Please write to me. I need you. I need your expertise. And I also guarantees that the presentation about the person who spoke, my colleague Fiona already said that we need this narration, and we will protect the narrator. She's also part of the commission of platform at ILSC. Please let us have this receipt and we can work on that. Thank you. I forget that we also want to build a living archive for women. So those who are interested, who have a perspective how we build this kind of living archive for women, it is something already prepared the term of reference. Please, I leave my email on the chat and let us build it together. These are not going to be only one part of the feminists around. Then we can have 3 days also to talk, to also archive and write the story of feminist women in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghislaine, for offering that leadership. And yes, we will see your email on the chat. I see Micah's hand is up again. Go, Micah. We have about 9 minutes to go, so we are not doing so badly for time.
Thank you, Sharon. So I just sort of wanted to come back to my comment, which I didn't have time to rephrase as a question, but I wanted either from the contributors or from anybody who's participating in this event, get some feedback or reflections on applying these feminist labor narratives in practice within organizations. I specifically am busy researching labor class systems in the fishery sector. This is with profit-making huge corporations, and where it is very clear in the policies on remuneration, advancement, skills development, etc., that roles occupied by women, and specifically Black and colored women, are viewed as extremely disposable. So the people occupying these roles are viewed as extremely disposable. And this is juxtaposed against the irreplaceability of people in the senior executive roles, on the board, senior management roles, etc. So this comment is away from national and regional feminist narratives on labor, but it's at the coalface of where labor is happening. So it's just something that I've been engaging with and considering in the last few weeks as I've done research in this particular sector, where women are particularly, and it's in the formal economy, and women are particularly vulnerable, racialized women are particularly vulnerable, and it's attached very closely to legacies of colonialism and apartheid, where these structures and class systems of labor were implemented or where they originated. So I'd just be interested to hear anybody else's experiences or reflections.
Thank you so much, Micah. I don't know if there is anyone. Oh, I see. I see we are utilizing the chat as we should be. So I appreciate that. And Clarice, you'd like to respond?
Yes, I wanted to respond to that. So yeah, the issue of labor, like I mentioned earlier, like the research that we did, in as much as it was talking about the labor of women within the context of the environment, we also touched like the background around it all is rooted in a colonial legacy. And I think I also mentioned it in my parting shots that like much of these issues to do with labor and development is an inheritance of a colonial legacy that has shaped the policies, the interaction, and how labor is viewed within the African context. And it has like really what can I say, sidelined the essence of labor and how labor was appreciated is it I confuse pre and post, pre-colonial era before colonialism. So I think it would be a great way to maybe have that narrative of like maybe assessing the current labor laws, like what defines an employee or a worker, and what are the definitions and scope of that role. And it's maybe the role and definition of labor which is limiting our understanding and the what can I say, and the recognition of the various forms of labor that we're speaking of, which is rooted in colonialism. So we really need to maybe expand, maybe country. I was also thinking like country specific like assessment of labor laws and stuff, and how we can navigate the space in terms of advocating for improved labor narratives and labor definitions, which recognizes the other labor across the globe and within the African context. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Clarice. I do not see another hand. So as we come to the end of today's session, I would like to thank everybody, all our contributors, for sharing such thoughtful, grounded and politically rich reflections. And thank you for everybody who has made the time to join us, contributed in the chat, asked questions, and held the space with us. The journal which we are launching today, the Development Journal on Pan-African Feminist Labour Narratives, reminds us that labor is not only about formal work or employment categories. It's about survival, care, dignity, resistance, embodiment, and the ways people continue to create life within difficult conditions. Please continue following our platforms, Navi's platforms, for updates, reflections, and access to the journal and recording from this series. Our last session will be next Tuesday at the same time. And thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. We want